The rain was falling in sheets that day, hammering against the black umbrellas gathered around the freshly dug grave, like nature itself was mourning alongside us. I stood there in my black suit, the one Emma had picked out for me 2 years ago when we attended her colleague's wedding, and I remember thinking how cruel it was that the same suit I wore to celebrate love was now the suit I wore to bury it. My hands were trembling as I clutched the small piece of paper where I had written my eulogy, the words blurring together because my eyes would not stop filling with tears no matter how many times I blinked them away. There were maybe 40 people gathered around as friends and family huddled together under the gray sky, and I could feel all of their eyes on me as I stepped forward to say goodbye to the woman I'd loved for 8 years, married for 6, and planned to spend the rest of my life with. I opened my mouth and the words came out somehow. Words about how Emma lit up every room she walked into, how her laugh was contagious, how she had this way of making everyone around her feel special and seen and important. I talked about our first date at that little Italian restaurant downtown where she spilled red wine on her white dress and laughed it off like it was the funniest thing in the world. I talked about our wedding day when she walked down the aisle and I forgot how to breathe. I talked about lazy Sunday mornings and inside jokes and the future we were supposed to have together, the children we were supposed to raise, the old age we were supposed to share. And the whole time I was speaking, there was a part of my brain that kept screaming, "This is not real. This cannot be happening. I am going to wake up any moment now, and she will be lying next to me in bed, and everything will be okay." But I did not wake up. This was my reality now. My wife was dead, and I was alone, and nothing was ever going to be okay again. I finished my eulogy and stepped back from the podium, and that was when I felt it. A vibration in my pocket. My phone. Someone was texting me in the middle of my wife's funeral, and I almost ignored it because who could possibly have anything important to say to me right now in this moment, but something made me reach into my pocket and pull it out anyway. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was Emma herself, reaching out from wherever she was to turn my entire world upside down one more time. I glanced down at the screen, expecting a condolence message from a distant relative or a coworker who could not make it to the service. But it was not a condolence message. It was not from anyone in my contacts. It was from an unknown number, sent through an encrypted messaging app I did not even remember downloading, and it contained 8 words that made my blood turn to ice in my veins. 8 words that made me forget how to breathe all over again, but for an entirely different reason. The message said simply, "I am still alive. Trust nitrogen monoxide 1. I stared at those words for what felt like an eternity, the rain soaking through my jacket, the priest's voice droning on in the background as he committed my wife's body to the earth, and my mind could not process what I was seeing. Was this a joke? Was someone actually cruel enough to prank a grieving widower at his wife's funeral? I looked up at the casket being lowered into the ground, the polished mahogany disappearing into the dark, wet earth, and I looked back at my phone and I thought I was going to be sick right there in front of everyone. Because if this message was real, if there was even the smallest chance that Emma had sent it, then who the hell was in that coffin? And if Emma was alive, why had she let me believe she was dead? Why had she put me through the worst 3 weeks of my entire life? Why had she let me identify a body that I thought was hers, plan a funeral, write a eulogy, and stand here in the rain crying over an empty grave? Nothing made sense anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the woman I loved had just been shattered into a million pieces by a single text message. And as I stood there trying to hold myself together, trying not to scream or collapse or run away, I realized something that made my skin crawl. The message said, "Trust no one." That meant someone here, someone at this funeral, someone standing under these black umbrellas pretending to mourn my wife, could not be trusted. Someone was watching me. Someone was part of whatever nightmare I had just stumbled into. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and forced myself to stand still forced myself to accept the condolences and handshakes and hugs from the other mourners. And the whole time my heart was pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. Everything had changed in a single moment, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Let me tell you about my life before that day, before the accident, before the funeral, before everything fell apart. My name is Daniel Carter, and for 34 years I lived what I considered to be a completely ordinary and unremarkable life. I grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio, went to a decent college, got a degree in computer science, and landed a stable job as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company. I was not rich, but I was comfortable. I was not famous, but I had good friends. I was not particularly handsome or charming or special in any way, but I was content with who I was. And then I met Emma, and suddenly my ordinary life became extraordinary, not because of anything I did, but because she chose to share her light with me. I remember the day we met like it was yesterday, even though it was 8 years ago. I was sitting in a coffee shop near my office, nursing my third cup of coffee and staring at my laptop screen, trying to debug a piece of code that had been driving me crazy for days. The shop was crowded that morning, every table taken, and I was so absorbed in my work that I did not notice the woman standing next to me until she cleared her throat and asked if the seat across from me was taken. I looked up, ready to give a distracted nod and go back to my code. And then I actually saw her, and I completely forgot what I was doing. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders in soft waves, green eyes that sparkled with humor and intelligence, and a smile that could have convinced me to do just about anything. She was wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a laptop bag, and she looked like she belonged in a magazine rather than a crowded coffee shop in the middle of downtown. I stammered something stupid, probably just a single word like no, or sure, or help yourself. And she laughed and sat down across from me and opened her own laptop and started working. And that should have been the end of it. Two strangers sharing a table in a busy coffee shop, both focused on their own work, destined to go their separate ways and never see each other again. But then she looked up at me and asked what I was working on, and I found myself explaining my coding problem to her, and she actually seemed interested. And before I knew it, we had been talking for 2 hours, and my coffee had gone cold, and I had not fixed the bug, but I did not care, because I had just met the most amazing woman I had ever encountered. Her name was Emma Walsh. She was 26 years old, and she worked as a marketing coordinator at a company called Vertex Media Group. She told me she had just moved to the city a few months ago for the job, that she did not know many people yet, that she spent most of her free time exploring new coffee shops and bookstores and trying to figure out where she belonged. She was funny and self-deprecating and genuinely curious about everything, asking me questions about my work and my hobbies and my life as if she actually cared about the answers. By the time we finally exchanged numbers and went our separate ways, I knew I was in trouble. I knew I was falling for this woman I had just met, and I knew I was probably going to make a fool of myself trying to win her over. And I knew there was no way someone like her would ever end up with someone like me. But I was wrong about that last part. We went on our first date 3 days later, that Italian restaurant I mentioned in my eulogy. And she did spill wine on her dress, and she did laugh it off. And I remember thinking that I had never met anyone so comfortable in her own skin, so willing to embrace imperfection and find joy in the little disasters that make up everyday life. We talked for hours that night, closing down the restaurant, walking through the streets of the city as the stars came out. And when I finally dropped her off at her apartment, and she kissed me on the cheek and told me she had a wonderful time, I felt like I was floating. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. 2 years of dinners and movies and lazy weekends spent doing nothing together. 2 years of meeting each other's families, of learning each other's quirks and flaws and fears, of building something real and solid and lasting. I proposed on a beach in Costa Rica during a vacation we had saved up for months to afford. And she said, Yes, before I even finished asking the question. And we got married 6 months later in a small ceremony surrounded by the people we loved most. Life was good. Life was better than good. Life was everything I had ever hoped it would be. Emma climbed the ladder at Vertex Media Group faster than anyone expected, going from marketing coordinator to senior manager to executive in the span of just 5 years. Her bosses loved her colleagues respected her, and she seemed to have a natural talent for the work that made her indispensable to the company. I was proud of her success, even though it meant she sometimes worked late nights and traveled to conferences on weekends and came home too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the couch with a glass of wine. She was building something. She told me she was making a name for herself, and once she reached a certain level, she could slow down, and we could focus on starting a family and all the other dreams we had talked about when we first got married. I believed her. I trusted her completely. Looking back now, I wonder if there were signs I should have noticed, red flags I should have paid attention to. In the weeks before the accident, Emma had been acting different, distracted, anxious. She would check her phone constantly, frowning at messages she refused to let me see. She started locking her laptop with a password she would not share with me, claiming it was company policy for security reasons. She would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would find her sitting in the living room staring at nothing, and when I asked her what was wrong, she would just smile and say she was stressed about work, and it was nothing I needed to worry about. I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded to know what was going on. But I trusted her, and I respected her privacy, and I told myself that whatever she was dealing with at work, she would tell me when she was ready. And then she died, and I thought I would never get the chance to find out what had been bothering her so much in those final weeks. The accident happened on a Thursday night 3 weeks ago. Emma was driving home from a marketing conference about 2 hours outside the city, one of those overnight events where executives networked and attended seminars and stayed in overpriced hotel rooms. She had texted me earlier that evening saying she was leaving soon, that she would be home by midnight, that she loved me and could not wait to see me. That was the last message I ever received from her, or at least the last message I thought I would ever receive until the funeral. The police showed up at my door at 3 in the morning, 2 officers with somber faces and careful words, and they told me there had been an accident. Emma's car had gone off a bridge about 40 miles outside on a stretch of road that wound through the hills and forests of the countryside. It was raining hard that night, they said. Visibility was poor, the roads were slick, and somehow Emma had lost control of the vehicle and crashed through the guardrail and plunged into the river below. They found the car the next morning when a passing driver noticed the broken guardrail and called it in. It took another day to recover the body. The current had carried it downstream, and by the time they found her, she was caught in some branches near the riverbank, bloated and battered and barely recognizable. They asked me to come to the morgue to identify the body, and I agreed because what else could I do? And I walked into that cold, sterile room and looked down at what remained of the woman I loved, and I said, "Yes, that is my wife, that is Emma," even though her face was so damaged from the impact and the water that I could barely make out her features. I identified her by the birthmark on her left shoulder, by the wedding ring still on her finger, by the necklace I had given her for our 5th anniversary that she never took off. It was her. It had to be her. The police ruled it an accident within a day. No evidence of foul play, no signs that another vehicle was involved, just a tragic combination of bad weather and dark roads and terrible luck. They closed the case and offered me their condolences and left me alone to plan a funeral for a woman I was not ready to say goodbye to. The next 3 weeks were the worst of my entire life. I could not eat, could not sleep, could not function like a normal human being. I took a leave of absence from work because I could not concentrate on anything, could not care about code or deadlines or projects when my entire world had just collapsed. I sat in our empty house surrounded by Emma's things, her clothes still hanging in the closet, her shampoo still in the shower, her coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter where she had left it the morning she drove away and never came back. Friends and family tried to help, tried to pull me out of the darkness, but I pushed them all away because I did not want comfort. I did not want to heal. I just wanted to disappear into the grief and never come out. Her parents were destroyed, her mother crying every time I saw her, her father stoic and silent, but with a haunted look in his eyes that told me he was dying inside, just like I was. We planned the funeral together, picking out the casket and the flowers and the music, and it all felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my own body, going through the motions without really understanding what I was doing. And then the day of the funeral came, and I stood in front of everyone and tried to say goodbye. And that was when my phone buzzed, and everything I thought I knew about Emma's death was revealed to be a lie. I stood there for the rest of the service in a daze, accepting hugs and handshakes and murmured condolences from people whose faces I could barely see through the fog of confusion in my mind. Everyone told me how sorry they were, how much they loved, and how I could call them any time I needed to talk, and I nodded and thanked them and pretended to be the grieving widower they expected me to be. But inside I was screaming. Inside I was desperately trying to make sense of those 8 words on my phone screen. I am still alive. Trust nitrogen monoxide 1. Was it really Emma? How could it be Emma? I had identified her body. I had seen her lying on that cold metal table in the morgue. I had watched her casket being lowered into the ground just minutes ago. But even as I tried to convince myself, it was impossible. Even as I told myself, this had to be some kind of sick joke or a scam or a hallucination brought on by grief, there was a small voice in the back of my mind whispering, what if? What if the body in the morgue was not Emma? What if someone else was in that car when it went off the bridge? What if my wife had staged her own death and disappeared, leaving me to mourn a woman who was still alive somewhere out there in the world? The thought was insane, and it was terrifying, and it filled me with a confused mix of hope and rage that I had never experienced before. Hope because maybe, just maybe, the woman I loved was not gone forever. Rage because if she was alive, that meant she had chosen to let me suffer, chosen to put me through the worst pain imaginable, chosen to lie to me in the most profound and unforgivable way possible. I needed to know the truth. I needed to find out if this message was real, or if someone was playing the cruelest game imaginable with my broken heart. So as the last of the mourners drifted away from the cemetery, as the rain finally began to ease and the gray sky lightened just slightly, I pulled out my phone and typed a response to the unknown number. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely hit the right keys, but I managed to write 3 words that I hoped would give me the answer I desperately needed. I wrote, "Who is this?" And then I added, "This is not funny." I hit send and waited, my heart pounding in my chest, the seconds stretching into what felt like hours. And then the reply came, and my whole body went cold, because the message contained something that only Emma could possibly know. It said, "It is me, Daniel. Remember what I said about the blue door?" And I did remember. I remembered perfectly, because the blue door was our secret, our private joke that we had never shared with anyone else in the entire world. It happened on our honeymoon in Greece, when we were wandering through the narrow streets of Santorini, admiring the white buildings and colorful doors, and we came across this little house with a bright blue door that was slightly open. Emma had laughed and said the door was inviting us in, said it was a portal to another life, and I had played along and said maybe we should walk through and see where it took us. We never did go through that door, but it became a symbol for us, a code word for taking chances and embracing the unknown and trusting each other completely. Whenever one of us was scared or uncertain about a decision, the other would say, "Remember the blue door." And it meant, "I am with you. I trust you. Let us do this together." No one else knew about that. Not our families, not our friends, not anyone. Which meant the person texting me was either Emma herself or someone who had somehow discovered our most private secret. Either way, I needed to know more. I needed to understand what was happening. I typed back, "Prove it." And the response came almost immediately. 3 words that would change the entire course of my investigation. The message said, "Check the locket." And I knew exactly what locket she meant, because Emma had a silver locket that she wore every single day. A locket that contained a tiny photograph of the 2 of us from our wedding day. She had been wearing it the morning she left for the conference. I remembered seeing it glinting at her throat as she kissed me goodbye. But when I identified the body in the morgue, the locket was not there. The police said it must have been lost in the river, swept away by the current, along with whatever other personal items had been in the car. But if Emma was telling me to check the locket, that meant it was not lost. That meant it was somewhere I could find it. That meant she had left it behind on purpose, left it as a clue for me to discover when the time was right. I looked around the cemetery to make sure I was alone, and then I walked as fast as I could till my car got behind the wheel, and drove home through the wet streets with my mind racing faster than the engine. Something was very wrong with everything I thought I knew about my wife's death, and I was about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. The rain had not stopped falling since morning, and now as I stood before my wife's casket, it seemed like the entire sky was weeping alongside me. 40 people gathered under black umbrellas, their faces blurred by my tears and the relentless downpour that soaked through everything. I had just finished delivering my eulogy, words I had spent 3 sleepless nights writing, words that could never truly capture who Emma was or what she meant to me. My voice had cracked multiple times as I spoke about our life together, about her infectious laugh, about the future we would never have. I stepped back from the podium feeling hollow and broken, like someone had reached inside my chest and ripped out everything that mattered. That was when I felt the vibration in my pocket. My phone. Someone was texting me during my wife's funeral, and my first instinct was to ignore it completely because nothing in the world could possibly matter right now. But something made me reach for it anyway. Some strange pull I cannot explain even now. I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen, expecting a late condolence message from someone who could not attend. Instead, I saw a message from an unknown number, sent through an encrypted app I did not remember installing. 8 words glowed on the screen, and when I read them, my entire world tilted sideways. I am still alive. Trust nitrogen monoxide 1. I stared at those words while the priest continued his prayers, and the casket began its slow descent into the wet earth. My hands started shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. This had to be a joke. A cruel, unforgivable joke. But even as I told myself that, a small voice whispered, "What if she is telling the truth? What if Emma is alive? And if she is alive, then who is in that coffin?" I drove home from the cemetery like a man possessed, my wet clothes sticking to the leather seat, my mind racing faster than the windshield wipers could clear the rain. Before leaving, I had texted back demanding proof, and the response had chilled me to my core. "Check the locket," the message said, and I knew exactly what that meant. Emma's silver locket, the one she wore every single day, the one containing our wedding photo. The police told me it was lost in the river when they recovered her body, but clearly that was not true. I burst through my front door and ran straight to our bedroom, to Emma's jewelry box sitting on the dresser where she had left it 3 weeks ago. My fingers trembled as I opened it and searched through the tangled necklaces and earrings inside. And there it was, hidden beneath a pile of bracelets, the silver locket that should have been at the bottom of a river 40 miles away. She had left it here on purpose. She had planned this. I opened the locket expecting to see our wedding photo, but something else was inside. A tiny micro SD card, so small I almost missed it, wedged behind where the photograph should have been. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears as I grabbed my laptop and inserted the card. There was only one file on it, a video file dated 2 weeks before Emma's accident. I clicked play, and suddenly there she was on my screen, my wife. alive and breathing and looking directly at the camera with fear in her eyes. She looked exhausted and paranoid, glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to burst through the door at any moment. And then she started talking, and everything I thought I knew about my life began to crumble. Emma's face filled my laptop screen, and even through the poor video quality, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her hands would not stop fidgeting. She looked like a woman who had not slept in days, a woman carrying a terrible secret that was slowly destroying her from the inside. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "if you are watching this, then something has happened and I had to disappear. I need you to understand that everything I am about to tell you is true, and I need you to trust me, even though I know I'm asking you to do something impossible." She paused and took a shaky breath before continuing. "I discovered something at work, something I was never supposed to find, and now there are people who want me dead. Very powerful people with connections everywhere. People who will stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. I cannot tell you everything yet because the less you know, the safer you are. But I need you to understand that I did not have a choice. I had to fake my death, or they would have killed me for real." Tears were streaming down my face as I watched her speak, a confusing mixture of relief and betrayal flooding through my system. She was alive. My wife was alive. But she had lied to me, let me suffer, let me grieve for 3 weeks while she hid somewhere out there in the world. I found myself wanting to hug her and scream at her simultaneously. The video continued with Emma's final warning, her voice dropping even lower. "Trust no one, Daniel. Not the police, not my family, not your friends. Someone close to us is involved in this. Someone at my funeral will be watching you, and if they discover you know the truth, they will come for you too. I will contact you when it is safe. I love you more than anything. Please forgive me." I spent the next several hours tearing apart Emma's home office, searching for anything else she might have left behind. Her company laptop was gone, taken by Vertex Media Group representatives who showed up at our house 2 days after the accident claiming they needed to retrieve company property. At the time, I had not thought anything of it, too consumed by grief to question why they were in such a hurry. But now I understood. They were not just retrieving company property. They were looking for evidence, trying to make sure Emma had not taken anything incriminating with her when she died. Fortunately, Emma had been smarter than they realized. Hidden in a hollowed-out book on a shelf, I found a USB drive containing files she had copied from the Vertex servers. I plugged it into my laptop and started going through the documents, and what I found made my blood run cold. Financial records showing millions of dollars flowing through shell companies with names I did not recognize. Client lists with payments that did not match any legitimate marketing services. Emails between executives discussing packages and deliveries and shipments in language that was clearly coded to hide the true nature of what they were moving. I am not a financial expert, but even I could see that Vertex Media Group was not just a marketing company. They were laundering money, massive amounts of it, and based on some of the references in the emails, the money was connected to something far more sinister than simple tax evasion. Emma had stumbled onto a criminal operation hiding behind the facade of a legitimate business, and when they realized she knew too much, they decided to silence her permanently. My wife had uncovered a conspiracy, and now I was holding the evidence in my hands. The question was what to do with it, and who I could possibly trust to help me. The message from Emma arrived just as I was finishing my review of the files. I texted her asking for more information, asking who specifically was behind this, and her response sent my investigation in a new direction. "Richard Hayes," she wrote, "my boss who promoted me and mentored me and treated me like a daughter. He is involved, but he is not the one in charge. He answers to someone else, someone named Victor Marsh. I knew Richard Hayes. I had met him at company parties and dinners, a charming man in his 50s with silver hair and an easy smile, who always made a point of telling me how talented Emma was. He had spoken at the funeral, delivering an emotional tribute that had moved several people to tears. Now I realized that entire performance was an act, that he was standing there pretending to mourn a woman he had tried to have killed. But Richard was not my only concern. As I thought back over the past 3 weeks, I started noticing things that had seemed innocent at the time, but now felt deeply suspicious. Emma's best friend Nicole had been unusually present since the funeral, stopping by constantly to check on me, always asking if Emma had left any work documents at home, always steering conversations toward what I planned to do with Emma's belongings. At first, I assumed she was just being supportive, but now I wondered if she was reporting back to someone. And then there was Detective Morrison, the police officer who handled Emma's accident case. He had closed the investigation almost immediately, ruling it an accident before any real examination of the evidence. At the time, I was too devastated to question his judgment, but now I pulled up his record online and discovered a pattern of cases involving Vertex clients that had all been closed with suspicious speed. Someone was paying him to look the other way. The question that haunted me more than any other was simple but terrifying. If Emma was alive, then who was in the coffin I had just watched being lowered into the ground? I had identified the body myself, looked at the damaged face, and confirmed it was my wife. So either I had been fooled, or I had been so consumed by grief that I saw what I expected to see, rather than what was actually there. Emma's next message provided the horrifying answer. Her name was Sarah Chun, she wrote, and I'm so sorry, Daniel, but I did not kill her. They did. They thought she was me. I searched for Sarah Chun online and found a missing persons report from a town about an hour away. 31 years old, similar height and build to Emma, disappeared from her apartment 2 days before Emma's accident. She had no family in the area, no close friends who would immediately notice her absence, no one who would identify her body if it turned up somewhere unexpected. The perfect victim for people who needed a corpse to stage an accident. According to Emma, the men sent to kill her had grabbed Sarah by mistake, probably based on a photograph that did not clearly show Emma's face. By the time they realized their error, Sarah was already dead, and Emma had discovered what happened. That was when she knew she had to run. She used Sarah's death to stage her own, putting Sarah's body in her car and sending it off the bridge, knowing the water damage would make identification difficult. It was brilliant and horrifying, and it meant my wife had used an innocent woman's death to save her own life. I did not know how to feel about that. Part of me understood why she did it. Understood that she was fighting for survival against people who would have killed her without hesitation. But another part of me looked at Sarah Chum's photograph and felt sick knowing she was buried in Emma's grave while her real family had no idea what happened to her. The house was dark when I heard the noise, a soft scratching at the back door that made every hair on my body stand up. It was nearly midnight, and I had been sitting in the living room with all the lights off, going through Emma's files again, trying to piece together exactly how deep this conspiracy went. I froze when I heard the sound, my breath catching in my throat as I listened for any indication of what was happening. Then I heard voices, low and muffled, and the click of the lock being picked. They were inside. I grabbed the USB drive and shoved it into my pocket, then crawled as quietly as I could toward the back of the house. From my position behind the couch, I could see 2 figures moving through the kitchen, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes searching for prey. "Find the files," one of them whispered, "and if he knows anything, we handle him like we handled her." They thought Emma was dead. They did not know about the messages, did not know she had contacted me, did not know I was already aware of their crimes. That was the only advantage I had, and I needed to use it. I slipped out the back window while they searched the front rooms, dropping into the wet grass and sprinting toward my car parked on the street. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the keys in the ignition, but somehow I managed to start the engine and pull away from the curb, just as the front door of my house burst open and the 2 men ran out onto the lawn. I saw their faces in my rearview mirror, twisted with anger and surprise, and I pressed the accelerator to the floor and disappeared into the night. I had escaped for now, but I knew they would not stop hunting me. I drove for hours with no destination in mind, just putting as much distance as possible between myself and the men who had broken into my home. Eventually, I found a rundown motel on the outskirts of a small town I did not recognize, the kind of place that accepted cash and did not ask for identification. I paid for 3 nights and locked myself in a room that smelled like cigarette smoke and desperation, and only then did I allow myself to breathe. My phone buzzed with a message from Emma. "They came for you," she wrote, which means they are getting nervous. They know someone has the files, but they do not know who. You need to stay hidden until I can figure out our next move. I typed back with trembling fingers. "Where are you? Can I see you? Please, Emma. I need to know you are really alive." There was a long pause before her response came. "I am sending you an address. Come alone tomorrow night at midnight. Tell no one where you are going. If anyone follows you, we are both dead." The address was for an abandoned warehouse about 2 hours away, in an industrial district that would be completely deserted after dark. It felt like a trap, like exactly the kind of place where someone would lure you if they wanted to make you disappear forever. But I did not care. I needed to see Emma with my own eyes, needed to touch her and hold her and confirm that she was really alive after 3 weeks of believing I would never see her again. I spent the rest of the night lying on the lumpy motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to prepare myself for whatever was going to happen next. Either I was walking into the arms of my wife or I was walking into my own grave. Either way, I had to know the truth. The warehouse loomed before me like a skeleton in the darkness, its broken windows staring down like empty eye sockets, its rusted walls groaning in the cold wind. I had arrived 30 minutes early and spent that time circling the perimeter, making sure no other cars were parked nearby, making sure I was truly alone. The address Emma had sent led to a side door that hung partially open, and I slipped inside with nothing but a small flashlight and a kitchen knife I had taken from my house before fleeing. My footsteps echoed in the vast empty space as I moved deeper into the building, past abandoned machinery and piles of debris that cast strange shadows in the beam of my light. And then I heard her voice, soft and familiar, and exactly as I remembered it. "Daniel," she said, and I spun around and there she was, stepping out from behind a concrete pillar, thinner than before and exhausted looking but unmistakably alive. "Emma." I ran to her and wrapped my arms around her and held on like I would never let go. And she was crying and I was crying, and for a long moment neither of us could speak. "I thought I lost you." I finally managed to say, "I thought you were dead. I buried you." "I am so sorry," she whispered against my chest. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I did not have any other choice. They would have killed me, Daniel, and then they would have killed you too for knowing me." She pulled back and looked into my eyes, and I could see the weight of everything she had been carrying for the past 3 weeks. "But we can fix this now," she said. "I have enough evidence to destroy them all, to bring down Victor Marsh and Richard Hayes and everyone else involved in their operation. I just need you to help me get it to the right people, and then this nightmare can finally be over." Emma had just finished explaining her plan when we heard the sound of car engines outside. Multiple vehicles approaching fast with their headlights cutting through the broken windows like searchlights. Her face went pale as she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back of the warehouse. "They found us," she gasped. I do not know how, but they found us. We ran through the maze of abandoned equipment, desperately searching for another exit. But before we could reach the back door, it burst open, and 3 men stepped through with guns drawn. And then from the front entrance came more footsteps, and I turned to see a figure walking calmly toward us, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete floor, his face illuminated by the flashlights of his men. Victor Marsh was exactly as I had pictured him from Emma's descriptions, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with cold eyes and a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. Did you really think I did not know? He said, his voice echoing through the empty space. Did you really think you could steal from me and disappear, and I would not track you down eventually? He turned to me, and his smile widened. And you must be the husband, the one who was supposed to stay ignorant and grieving while your wife hid like a rat in the walls. Emma stepped in front of me, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. I already sent the files to the FBI, she said. It is over, Victor. They are coming for you. Victor laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. No, you did not, he replied. But it was a nice try. He raised his gun and pointed it directly at Emma's chest, and I knew in that moment that I could not let her die again. I stepped in front of her just as sirens suddenly erupted in the distance, growing louder, and Victor's men started shouting in confusion, and everything dissolved into chaos as a gunshot rang out and the world went black. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like thunder, and for a moment I was certain I was dead. I felt myself falling, felt the cold concrete rushing up to meet me, felt Emma's scream piercing through the chaos around us. But the pain I expected never came, and when I opened my eyes I realized the bullet had not hit me at all. One of Victor's men was lying on the ground, clutching his shoulder, taken down by a shot that came from somewhere behind us. The warehouse erupted into absolute pandemonium as FBI agents poured through every entrance, their tactical gear and assault rifles, transforming the abandoned building into a war zone. Victor tried to run, but two agents tackled him before he made it 10 feet, slamming him face first into the concrete while shouting for him to stay down. His men dropped their weapons and raised their hands, realizing instantly that they were outnumbered and outgunned. I lay on the ground in complete shock, unable to process what was happening, until Emma's face appeared above me, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pulled me into her arms. She had lied about sending the files, but she had not lied about having a plan. She had contacted the FBI days ago, fed them information through a secure channel, and arranged for this confrontation to be the trap that brought Victor Marsh down forever. It worked, she whispered against my ear. It is finally over. But as the agents led Victor past us in handcuffs, he turned and looked directly at Emma with a smile that made my blood freeze. You think this is over, he said calmly. You have no idea what you have started. And somehow I knew that even though we had won this battle, the war was far from finished. Now I need you to do something for me, because this story is not complete. If you felt your heart racing during this video, if you found yourself holding your breath waiting to see what happened next, then smash that like button and let me know this story connected with you. Drop a comment below telling me what you think happens next, who you believe was really pulling the strings behind Victor Marsh, and whether you think Emma can truly be trusted after everything she put Daniel through. Do you believe their marriage can survive this betrayal? Or has the foundation of their relationship been cracked beyond repair? Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell because part 2 is coming soon. And trust me when I tell you that everything you think you know is about to be turned upside down. The truth about Emma's past, the identity of the real mastermind behind the conspiracy, and the shocking betrayal that neither Daniel nor Emma saw coming. Share this video with someone who loves mystery and thriller stories, someone who enjoys being kept on the edge of their seat. And come back next week when we continue this journey into the darkness. Remember what Emma said at the very beginning of this nightmare. Trust no one. That warning was not just for Daniel. It was for all of us. Because in this world of lies and deception, the person standing closest to you might be the one holding the knife behind their back. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never stop questioning the truth.